Hey beer friends, welcome back to my channel. I'm Tammy, also known as the Brewess. Welcome to my beer tasting journey for my Cicerone exam. I'm actually doing something different today. I've been working on some light beers, but today I actually have a dark beer, and I typically like dark beers, but I had said in my very first video that I'm working on beers that I struggle with, and the one that I have today I struggle with because of the yeast. So yeast can give a lot of character and aroma to different beer styles, and this one in particular does that, and I just do not enjoy that aroma. So we'll see how it goes today, but it is a dark beer, so that does help a little bit. So yeah, I'll just get right to it. The one that I have today is a Dunkelweiss from Paulaner. So, fun random fact about me, because I have to go on a bunch of tangents and side quests. I'm actually half Swiss, and while my dad never taught us German, I was able to go to Switzerland last year with my mom to visit family, and then later in the year I won a scholarship to go to Germany for the hop harvest. So I just decided, you know what, I'm an adult, I can do what I want, more or less, so I'm gonna learn German. So I kind of studied it in the past on my own, but not a lot, and so I've actually really been focusing on it. So I've been doing Duolingo now for 6 months, and I'm surprisingly sticking with it every day. So it's helpful in studying for Cicerone because a lot of the words describe the type of beer. So Dunkel actually means dark, Weiss means wheat, and beer means beer. So this is a dark wheat beer. There's other beer styles like Schwarz beer. Schwarz means black. Helles, when I did the Helles lager, Helles means light, so it's a light lager. Maibach, which I'm going to do at some point. I got a can of that today. Mai means May in German, and so it's a beer that would come out in May. So I like to teach those words too, but it also helps you. Like if I'm reading a question on a practice exam and I don't know what the answer is based on most of the information, but I see the German word, I'm like, okay, yeah, I know the answer now. So yeah. So again, we talked about proper glassware a little bit, and the proper glassware for a Dunkelweiss, because everything needs to have its own glass, would be this style. You can see it's really kind of like a bowl shape at the top. This is what's called a Weizen vase. I mean, it looks kind of like a vase. It's hard to tell because this is obviously not to scale, but it's like it's a taller glass. So I don't have a Weizen vase. I do have, sorry, this is a Weizen vase 2. This is the Weizen vase style 1. I do have one of these. So I'm going to use this today and just, overlook my taboo. Here is my glass. I actually got it when I was in Switzerland. I went to this brewery called Feldschlossen, and it's so cool. Look it up on YouTube or on the internet. It's basically like this huge, I mean, it almost looks like a castle, and you can see it from the train. So just the train pulls into town, and this is basically the town, it's the brewery, and it's huge, and you can do tours, which I missed, but they're one of those places that still like delivers beer in town by horse. So it's really cool. It's really cool. It's been around for a long time. It's now owned by Carlsberg. This is life. But I bought this glass and I love it. And every time I drink out of it, I'm afraid I'm going to knock it over and break it. So I hope today's not the day. So, oh, I have a weird can. One thing I love about German glassware, and I'm probably not pouring it super well. Interesting. My can's kind of got a little bump on the bottom. Keep pouring more. So you can see on the back of my glass, It's labeled with the line half a liter. So this is a 500 ml can. So basically this whole can should fit in here, and then the head or the foam should take up that extra space. Sometimes, you know, it's not so much like this in the US, but when you're in Europe, you're gonna have glasses and they're gonna be labeled, like that's like standard. And so it's interesting when people see these videos of like Oktoberfest and they see these Moss mugs and they're like, well, they're getting all this foam and they're like not getting beer. Well, no, the beer is at the level it's supposed to be at. You're getting a liter and then the rest is foam. So that's why I like drinking out of this glass when I have beers from Europe. So I'm not gonna go all the way because Weiss beers tend to have like sediment at the bottom. Not always, but they can. And so if you've got stuff at the bottom and then you're just pouring that, you're just getting more of that yeast characteristic that I don't really care for. So I'm trying to just sort of like leave that off. So Weiss beer, okay. It's an interesting style. So Weiss means wheat. So it's a beer that's made with wheat. However, when you're brewing, most barley that's used for brewing is what? Okay, sorry, let me back up. Malt that is used for brewing is usually barley, and barley's got what we call like a little husk. It's like a little shell. And when you grind that to mix it with your water and like start making your beer, like your mash, that husk acts as like a filter agent, so that your grain doesn't get all stuck together, because basically grain is full of like starch and sugar, and so you're almost like making oatmeal, and if you don't have anything to help filter, it just kind of gets all like glued together, and so that's what we call a stuck mash. So wheat, even if it's been malted, does not have that little husk on the outside, so you can't really ever brew a beer entirely with just wheat, like 100% wheat. I mean, it might be possible, but you would be there for like days trying to get that to like filter properly. So when we talk about a Weiss beer, it's usually 50-50. It's like 50% barley and then 50% wheat, because you need that barley in there. You could go up to as much as like 2/3 wheat and like 1/3 barley, but this is like the traditional recipe, or I should say a grain bill. So another thing that comes with that, with using wheat, is that you tend to get more, like what they're called glucans, and so that also tends to contribute to the cloudiness. So usually beer that is brewed with wheat is a little more hazy. So it's kind of hard to tell because it is a dark beer, but you know, if you've looked at beers like say a stout and you shine a light through it, it's pretty clear. This is opaque and hazy. It's not clear. If you've ever had a New England style IPA, that's kind of, I don't even know if it's trendy anymore. I don't know where we're at with anything, but basically a lot of those recipes use wheat and oats as well, because it keeps things sort of like hazy and cloudy. So when we look at this and we look at the clarity, I'm gonna say hazy. I'm not gonna say slightly hazy, I'm gonna say actually hazy, because there's like nothing getting through there at all. No light getting through at all. And then we look at the color. So it's, even though it's called a Dunkelweiss, which you know, Dunkel means dark, it's not black. It's not super, super dark. I would probably say, it almost like verges on like a red, which is hard to tell with my lighting here, but maybe like a really, like a dark ruby. I'm gonna say like, or like a dark gold. I'm gonna say dark gold to light brown. And what I'm doing now is I'm writing some notes because I tend to forget what I am noticing. And then I get to the end and I've had some sips and I don't know what I'm doing anymore. Foam. The foam is pretty good. The head, when I poured it, was really nice. And it also is lasting. So I'm going to say that's got really nice head retention. And the foam is large. And that is not surprising because even though, sorry, good head retention, even though I'm not great with the tasting, I could read a description and know that this is going to have good head retention because the wheat that's in the beer helps with that head retention and the foam. So I just know that as a brewer, having made these beers and you know, tried these beers at other places, I know that that's going to contribute to the head retention. So the aroma, this is where I get kind of tripped up a bit. So Weiss beer, if it's a Dunkelweiss or just a regular like Hefeweizen, if you've heard of that style, they use a specific strain of yeast that's considered like a Hefeweizen yeast. It's for wheat beer. And what that yeast does is when it ferments, it gives off what we call phenols. And those phenols are usually for wheat beer clove. Like if you've ever had any sort of like holiday seasonal, like pumpkin spice, apple spice, etc. Like clove is usually in that mix. It's kind of spicy. And banana. And the actual chemical term for that banana is isoamyl acetate. And I share that just because I think it's fun to say, but I don't like that flavor, so it kind of bums me out. But so that is very standard for this type of beer, and that all comes from the yeast. So if you have a beer that is not supposed to have those flavors, like say you have a lager or a stout or, you know, an amber, and they've got those aromas, they probably use the wrong yeast. And so for me, the trouble I have is that I smell it, I don't really care for that smell, and then I don't want to drink it. So I've noticed that having just been to Germany, I need to just sort of get past that and just start drinking it and see how I feel about the flavor along with the aroma, because it is like a whole entire sensory process. It's not just the aroma. So I would say intensity of the aroma, I would say medium to pronounced. And then the characteristics. So I know that it's coming from the bacteria. I'm sorry, the yeast. I'm looking at my sheet. It's coming from the yeast. So I don't get a lot of aroma from like the hops or the grain. Because again, they're probably using very light grains. And then maybe a little teeny bit of a dark grain to give it the color. And then you might get like a little bit of like roasted characteristic from that grain. But really, you know, the grain that is the majority of this recipe is light. Aroma characteristics. So I'm gonna say, yeast. All right, now we're gonna taste it. Man, I'm really bummed because I do not care for that. I'm gonna try again. I'm gonna say that the carbonation is medium. The fact that I still kind of have some head here gives me a clue to that. I'm also going to say the body is medium, and that might surprise people because a lot of times people think that anything that's dark is super heavy and like, I've heard like stout or like a Guinness described as a meal, and it's interesting because Guinness is actually a very light beer and it's only 4%. It's got very light body. It's just the color that's dark. So while this is dark, I don't get a lot of body. But because the wheat is in there, that helps with the body. So that's why I lean towards, you know, medium. So now I'm on to alcohol. I'm going to say medium, and I cheated a little bit because I looked at the can, but I also know that, again, this is still a German style of beer, and a lot of them tend to be around that like 5%, unless we're talking about a Bock or like a sour. But that seems to be just sort of like the ABV mark that they shoot for. This one is actually 5.3%. Bitterness. I'm going to say medium to medium high. And I say that because you can get bitterness from the hops or from the malt. And usually darker malts that have been roasted are more bitter because they're basically roasted like you would roast coffee. And so if you think about just eating like a coffee bean straight, that's kind of what it would be like eating this grain. And so you do get some of that bitter flavor from those darker malts. So this is not necessarily hop derived. So what did I say? I already forgot because I'm talking. Bitterness. I said medium. I don't know. Medium to high. Medium to medium high. That's what I'm gonna say. Sweetness. I don't. I'm gonna say low. Because when we talk about sweetness in beer, you're going to hear the term dry. You hear that a lot in wine, actually. If wine is dry, then it's just, it makes your mouth kind of feel like a little dry. It can. If there's any sweetness, which we call residual sweetness, then it's not dry. So unless a beer has like totally been like 100% fermented, there's no sugar left in there at all, it's going to have a little bit of sweetness. I don't taste it and I don't get that feeling because the sugar, when you're drinking a sweet beer, it does have like some weight, if that makes sense. So like if you've ever made like sugar water or syrup, just like regular like maple syrup or like a corn syrup, it's got like a feeling and a weight, and so I don't get that here, but I know that it's not super dry. So I'm gonna say low for that one. The finish, which is again kind of how long does it last? I'm gonna say medium because some of that yeast, the characteristics from the yeast, I'm still tasting. I do still get a little bit of bitterness after swallowing, like, and then like waiting a few seconds, I still get that. So I'm gonna say the finish is medium. And then we look at anything else, like the quality in general. And again, I didn't talk about the brewery, which I should have because I went there. So Paulaner has been around for hundreds of years. There are 6 like major breweries in Munich. Paulaner is one of them, and they have, who did they merge with? It's escaping me now because I've been drinking. But basically, so they've been around since 1634. And so, you know, we're at the point now in today's age where they've got all the technology and the lab equipment, et cetera. So they're doing their testing and their quality control and quality assurance. So we know that there shouldn't be any off flavors, or anything, you know, weird about this beer, no particles floating, et cetera. This is one of the breweries I wanted to go to when I was there. I did actually go to the brewery, what I thought was a brewery, and it was an office because that's what showed up on my map. And I walked in and it was like a reception desk. And I asked if they did brewery tours, and they just kind of looked at me like, this is an office? But in my mind, I was like, yeah, but we're in Munich, so like, don't you have a beer garden somewhere? And yeah, they didn't. So that was silly on my part. They did have a beer garden like across the street and up some stairs and whatever, and it was beautiful, but it wasn't open, so I couldn't go. But yeah, so Paulaner. So if you're ever looking for beers that are like true to style, you know, when I did the Munich Helles, same idea, Munich beer, you're going to look for Paulaner, Augustiner. The one that I did was Spaten. What else? Hackershore. And then I'm forgetting the other ones. But there's 4. There's 6. I just named 4. Anyway, yeah. So that's that beer. Okay. So how did I actually do? Where is my little card? So again, we're talking about a Dunkelweiss. So it could be Dunkel's Weiss beer or Dunkelweiss. I usually see Dunkelweiss or Dunkelweizen. So let's see. So from the fermentation notes, which is what the yeast gives you, you're going to get banana, clove. Yeah, banana and clove, really. Like, those are the main ones. And some people get both. Some people get just one or the other. So like, that's always tricky for me. From the malt, you'll get some toasty notes, nutty, and some caramel. Let's see. So perceived bitterness. I didn't write down the other ones, like the hazy or the color. Color is listed as amber to brown. So again, I said dark gold to light brown. So like, I guess that's kind of in that range. The alcohol is, I think, considered medium. It's usually 4.3 to 5.6%. Glass you would drink in a Weizen base, which I sort of have. Let's see, so medium. So the body is medium to medium full. I said medium. High carb. I said medium, but I definitely see high carb as well. I can see that. The perceived bitterness is low. What did I say for bitterness? See, I said medium to medium high. I'm really not great at this, am I? So, yeah, I got to think about that. What else? The only other thing I wrote on here was this particular recipe is typically 50% wheat malt, 30% Pilsner malt, and then 20% Munich or dark malts. So Munich is a type of malt that's not very dark, but it's dark enough to give it some color. So because this is a beer that is from Munich, they probably would use a Munich malt. So I don't know. I would say for this one I give myself like a 50% because I did okay, but I definitely need some more practice. I will say again, a lot of this is situational. So when I was able to go to Germany last year, I went to Schneiderweisse, which is originally a Munich brewery, but then during World War II, the brewery was bombed and they decided not to rebuild. So they're actually now based outside of Munich in a town called Kelheim. And Schneider is the name of the founder, and then Weisse means wheat. So all of their beers are wheat beers. They do have a lager though, I believe, which is kind of like newer for them. But basically, they have a hopped wheat beer, they have a light wheat, they have a dark wheat, they have like a really strong ABV wheat. You know, they have a lot of different styles, but they're all wheat beers, which means they're all going to use that same type of yeast. And I actually loved every single one of them. And I think a lot of it was just, their recipe is obviously a little different, but also it was where we were sitting and who I was sitting with and what we were eating and what we were talking about. And so I just remember it was a really great experience and I really enjoyed the beer. So again, you know, you might like an IPA from somewhere and not from somewhere else. They might be the same style, but they just taste differently. So that's kind of how I feel about this. I had higher hopes. And I'll keep trying, I'll keep practicing with this, but it's not my favorite dark wheat beer. So anyway, hopefully this was helpful, or at the very least just entertaining. If you are interested in a certain style of beer, or if you want me to talk about the history of beer, I love doing that too. So just let me know. Leave me a comment or a message. Share if you want. Like, subscribe. I don't know, all those things that people tell you to do. Or not. You do you. So anyway, thank you for joining me, and I will see you next time. That's why I don't like it.